it is ever thus. It would seem that adoration of the divine persons proceeds not merely from his gifts, but from those revelations that come from time to time to our spirits when we perceive something about the divine persons. This morning we shall notice from our reading of one of the scenes of worship in heaven that John has recorded, that when in the Bible we read of people worshipping, they are generally worshipping as a response to some specific glory of God. They are not merely content to say that God is glorious. We all know that. It is some special feature about God that has gripped their heart and is promoting their worship. One of the reasons why our worship is sometimes weak, and yet who am I to criticize? I criticize myself. But sometimes one of the reasons why our worship is weak is because we are content with generalisms. Oh, how wonderful God is. Well, we knew that. Wonderful, what were you meaning when you said wonderful? Wonderful in what respect? You would help us to worship more if you specified what it is. If I may for a moment again descend from high levels to low. Could happen, couldn't it, that after this meeting I go home and I remark to my friends, did you see Mr. Ponsonby's car this morning? No. Oh, you should have seen Mr. Ponsonby's car. He's a new car, you know. It's marvellous car. And my friends say, yes, it's marvellous car. Well, what about it? What was marvellous? Well, it was wonderful. Yes, it was wonderful. Yes. What was it? What was it about the car that was wonderful? Well, I say, well, it was marvellous, I mean to say. It had four wheels, and then it got a steering wheel, and it was wonderful. It doesn't get you very far, does it? Why, the ladies, if I might say so, would do better than that. The ladies would say it was a wonderful car. You should have seen the colour tones. Oh, it was a delightful powder blue, and the seats were to match, and they weren't that old Rexine stuff. They were real suede, and there were carpets on the floor this deep. Now they're telling you something about the car, aren't they? Why, it is wonderful. And the 16-year-old gentleman would have done better than I would. They wouldn't have said it had four wheels. They would have said it was VHF and fuel injection, and it went from 0 to 60 in minus 10 seconds, and its rating was this. Why couldn't I say all those things? And could only manage it was wonderful. Because I don't know much about cars, that's the answer. Cars? Oh, I just know them as things going along the street. I don't know much about them. Why is it that sometimes I can't manage more than to say, God is wonderful? Could it be that I don't live quite near enough to see any more detail? And with those thoughts in our minds, we come to this scene in Revelation 4, where, so John tells us, he was permitted to hear the very worship of heaven, and the living creatures beneath the throne of God, and the 24 elders that surround that throne, engaging in their superlative worship of God. Why do they worship? You say because God is wonderful. Of course, sir, he's wonderful. What in particular is it that moves them to worship him? And if you ask them, it is the superb character of his government. For on this occasion, as they worship, their attention is caught by him who sits upon the throne. And it is the wonderful character of God as the moral governor of the universe that is drawing forth their worship. So John tells us there was a throne in heaven, and one sat upon it. A veritable gospel for a confused world like ours, that there is a throne and it isn't vacant. One sits thereon. But pray, what is he like? A question you might ask with some insistence, because this book of the Revelation is about to tell you that from that throne there shall presently proceed judgments dark and terrible. Say, what kind of a throne is it that will allow and issue such judgments as suffering under them men shall gnaw their tongues for very pain? Say, what kind of a character is he that sits on that throne? It is to be noticed that before those judgments descend, the highest intelligences in the universe are found bowing down in worship, in admiration of the character of him who sits on that throne. Indeed, it is the wrath of God, among other things, that when it is rightly understood, will move our worship. God helps us to see the nature of that throne and its government and the character of him that sits on it by a geometrical description. He says that round about in full circle of the throne there went a rainbow, green in colour. I presume the circle went vertically, that the rainbow was like we see them on earth, only full circle right round the throne. And then round about the throne, and this time presumably horizontally going round, there were 24 other thrones, likewise occupied with elders, clothed in linen and golden crowns upon their head. Can you visualize it? A throne occupied and two circles, the one going vertically all the way round and the other going horizontally all the way round it. So that if we continue to think geometrically, as we're meant to do, then it becomes true that everything that goes out of that throne, every command that is issued, every act of judgment that proceeds from that throne must go through and pass those two circles. What are those two circles? The first is a rainbow, the rainbow indeed. With its mention, we are back to the story of Noah and the flood. How God at one stage in history, because of the exceeding great wickedness and violence of men, drowned our whole world in a flood. But after that judgment promised that he would never destroy the world again with water. God in his mercy setting a limit to his judgments. And I bid you ponder it a moment and read therein something of the heart of God, that the transcendent Lord, who need not give account to anybody and does according to his will in the army of heaven, that he should himself put a limit to his judgment. Oh, what volumes of his mercy does it speak? Tormented and grieved and provoked by man's sin and continuing violence and stupidity, that God himself should put a limit to his judgment. We may stand amazed by the patience of Almighty God before the provocations of clay